Hey guys, this is Kevin for Pixavert.com. The new AMD CPUs have now arrived and they're available in the shops. I will have a link to these in the description if you want to get them. We're going to be taking a look at benchmarks in this video. I promised I'd let you know when AMD's EXPO memory had arrived. It's now arrived in the United States and it's going to allow you much easier overclocking on the AM5 socket. So I'm going to be recommending a couple of sticks over on Amazon. We've got the G-Skill Flare series, and this one is a 6000 speed with 36 latency, $190. It's not that much more expensive than some of the non-specialist memory. Another one I'm going to recommend is the Corsair Dominator Platinum. This one is high-end, top of the line for Corsair. Another very good brand. This one is coming in at $300, 32 gigs of RAM, 6000 speed, 36 latency, and you get a whole bunch of options here. You've got different colors, you've got different speeds. I'll link to these two in the description and hopefully you'll find something of interest there. Passmark's benchmark has a number of new additions. We've got the 7950X from AMD coming in at 64,000. That is an amazing score. It's way up there with the Threadripper CPUs. That's the multi-threaded performance. The 13900K is coming in a lot lower at 54,000. The 7900X, which is about the same price as the 13900K, is coming in at a fairly similar performance level to the 13900K. AMD has completely overwhelmed the multi-core performance of the 12900K and the 12900KF and KS, which is quite an amazing achievement. When we take a look a little bit further down, we can see the 13700 coming in. This is probably an engineering sample. I think there's only been a single one sampled so far. Coming in at a respectable 34,000. And we can also see that AMD's 7600X is also here at 28,000. It is a huge amount higher than the previous version, which is the 5600K. It's 21,000. We need to take a look on Geekbench. Now, the difference between the multi-core performance on the Passmark site was about 20%. We're seeing a difference here with the Geekbench scores of about 15%. So it's kind of clarifying and confirming the results that we saw. Here, however, the single core performance for the AMD 7950X, which is coming in at 24,000, the single core performance is slightly higher than the single core performance for the 13900K. A little bit of a mixed result. One thing I did notice was that quite a lot of the tests were on balanced power plan, and this is something I try to avoid in my own testing. We can see that again for the 7950. I try to use the high performance setting, and with Passmark they do actually warn you that using the balanced power plan can affect the results, and it certainly does. So perhaps that might explain some of the differences that we're seeing. Back to Passmark, when it comes to the single thread performance, we can see the Ryzen 5 7600X coming in at a huge improvement over the previous generation. It's one of the biggest improvements that I can recall seeing at 4191. Now, there are still just a few samples, and from having just looked at the data in a little bit more detail, I think we're going to see this number actually go up. When it comes to the i7 13700, we can see the single thread performance is also very impressive. And what's really impressive about this is the typical TDP, 65 watts. This is looking to be a very, very interesting and potentially, when it does launch, it hasn't launched yet, potentially a very, very, very good chip. When it comes to the 13900K, this is the new big beast, at least the biggest beast that we've got on this particular chart. We can see 4833. That is an amazing score. For the 7950X, it's still down at 43,077. And here we can see the 12900K with a single core performance of 4209. And it was that kind of score that gave Intel that huge lead over the last year. But we do see here the massive TDP and the energy hungry Intel chips. It'll be interesting to see what the energy consumption is going to be for the 13th generation compared to the 7000. I think that's going to be an interesting tale. When we take a look at another benchmark, the CPU user benchmark, we see with the average benchmark, the 13900K comes on top with 130, whilst the 7950X comes at 118. This is not very surprising because the 13900X probably does have the faster single core performance. However, even if we go up to 8 cores, 64 cores, it doesn't change. We still see the 13900K coming out on top, which makes me kind of like a little bit surprised with this particular benchmark. It doesn't seem to agree with the other ones that we've looked at. And for the 5800X 3D, the one which came out in April and which probably is still one of the fastest gaming GPUs, it's all the way down at number 24. Now this is significant because this particular site changed their entire methodology in around 2019 in order to remove AMD's Threadrippers from the highest ranked scores so that they could support the gamers. However, this is a very good gaming chip and it shouldn't be down at 24, 6 months after the arrival of the CPU. Now the 5800X 3D uses very new technology and we're going to see more of that. However, since it has a very good gaming performance, it does raise the question as to why the benchmark hasn't been changed to allow it a much higher score, and why we're seeing these very good scores from Intel even when we go to the multi-threaded scores. Talking about benchmarks that are causing a little bit of confusion, there was a little bit of a disagreement between Intel and some of their partners in the media. Now this all started when Linus Techtips did a video criticizing the way that Intel presented their comparison between the 13000 series and the 7000 series from AMD. And that particular video had quite a lot of criticisms of Intel, basically accusing them of lying. Now that's a very serious accusation from one of Intel's media partners, and what we see here was a tweet which came out yesterday. I got a little bit involved in this. I wanted to support Intel, and Intel Technology came out with a tweet saying, "Dear Linus, we conducted the performance testing on the AMD parts within specification based on AMD's public guidance regarding max memory speeds found here and here." Now they link to a bunch of memory speeds which, if you've watched this channel, you'll know we've been talking about this and having a bit of fun against AMD with these numbers here, these strange hieroglyphic numbers. And what they're doing is basically explaining why they used the settings that they did. And these are the settings that Linus Techtips was actually criticizing. Now, like I say, if you've been watching this channel recently, you will know these numbers. Here we are with the 5950X. We can see the maximum memory speed is up to 3200 megahertz. And all mega transfer rates, and we can see here the 5800X 3D. Here we see a bunch of different numbers indicating again 3200 is the fastest, and we can see here the slowest that they can actually guarantee is 2667, and that's when you've got all the 4 sticks inside the 2 memory channels. The question that Linus Techtips was asking was, why weren't they using faster memory? And if we come here to the performance index, which Intel have going back for several generations, it's possible to actually check what they do. And from what I've done, I've looked at a couple of years and I've came to the conclusion that they are extremely fair to AMD. For instance, with the current generation, they tested their own DDR5 with very good memory, DDR rate of 5600, and here we can see AMD's DDR4 3200. That is the fastest speed that AMD actually specifies, so that's the fastest speed that they guarantee. Now you can run faster speed, but obviously AMD is not guaranteeing that. And for those people who are doing work inside of After Effects or Premiere Pro who need stability, they need to think about whether they should overclock or whether they should go instead for stability. And you can see that they used very low latency memory here. And from what I can tell, they were very scrupulously fair to AMD. Now, AMD have numbers that indicate when you're running 4 memory sticks, you're going to be getting speeds, guaranteed speeds that are significantly slower. And that's significant if you are, again, running, say, After Effects and you've got 128 gigs of memory. What Intel did was that they tested this with 2 gigs of RAM. So they didn't go into those very low speeds that AMD guarantee. And unfortunately, what Linus Techtips was suggesting was that they should overclock the memory, but I think that would be dishonest. I think that would be taking specifications that AMD have not guaranteed and using those as the basis for the comparison. I don't think that would be beneficial to Intel, but much more than that, I think that would be damaging to the press and the people who rely on the numbers that Intel publish. I think all that's required is for Intel to be scrupulous. And it does raise the question, how will they handle this situation with the latest generation, the 7950X, where we have these strange hieroglyphic numbers? My current interpretation of these numbers is that as soon as you have 2 sticks of RAM, you drop down to 36 mega transfers. And that's something which would be really interesting to see in a presentation. It might well be the most honest presentation that Intel could do, but obviously it would be using the numbers from AMD, and it would probably be leaving quite some performance on the table. But AMD, if they could guarantee 5200 mega transfers when you've got 2 sticks of RAM, surely they would state that in their marketing. So I think Intel are handling this just right, and I think the criticisms were unfair but also unjust, because if Intel were to respond to the criticisms and to change their methodology, they would now be overclocking, they would be undervolting, it would be chaos. Now, it's probably fair for some of the other reviewers to use overclocked memory and to use overclocked settings, but as long as they're saying that they're using memory and settings that are overclocked, I don't think that's a problem at all. So this is another chart that created a bit of controversy. This is the performance chart for the 5950X, the 12900K and the 13900K and the Ryzen 7 5800X 3D. Now, we've already said that this is probably one of the best gaming chips anywhere, and we can see that it does perform. It's the little red dot right there, and sometimes it is actually outperforming Intel's latest generation. We can see that in several areas here. So Intel are in trouble as far as gaming is concerned. And not only that, but we've also heard from AMD that they're going to be coming out with 7000 series versions of the X3D CPU. Now, when the 5800X3D came out, I did a video and I said that it was potentially a game changer. And we're seeing evidence of that now. If they can come out in the next 2 to 3 months with a 7000 series version of this CPU, you can imagine what this chart is going to look like. Those little red lines will be up in the stratosphere. So Intel have got a lot of competition, but I'm interested to know, you guys, how do you think these companies should go about presenting the competitive data? Intel, AMD, I think they have a role in keeping each other honest. But what do you guys think? Should they use the overclocked numbers? Should they stick with the specified numbers? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.